Hey, all you mudslingers out there. How you doing? My name is Chuck, and we are at the old school podcasting wheel here today. We're going to talk about how to make a mug. That's right. We're mugging you right now because that's what we do on this show. We give you fun stuff to do. It's kind of a first stop for most potters to kind of play with mugs, get their hands in the mud, feel what it feels like. And, you know, everybody wants something functional to start with. And mugs can be tricky, but I got a couple of shortcuts I'm going to teach you. So get your pencils ready, take good notes, because we're about ready to start the Old School Podcast. In this episode, we'll take on mugs. That's right, everybody wants to make a nice coffee mug. Our topics today will include wedging, throwing, centering, opening, and pulling. So we talked a little bit before about, how to get your clay kneaded properly, and that's called wedging. And what that does is it prepares the clay for this point right here. See this? This is kind of the center, and you notice the circles on my bat area here. The center is everything when it comes to pottery. Pottery is about math. It's about science and geometry. I know you didn't tune in to learn all that stuff, but trust me when I tell you, it's really, really important that we start here in the center. So the next part of this you're going to learn, it took me the longest time to figure out. I'm going to show you a couple of shortcuts. Start with a nice round ball of clay and a wet bat. Not super wet, but damp. So just take your sponge, maybe you do this or get your wheel started and get a little circle going here. What I like to do is to take my finger, get a little mud, right? Start in the center and then pull out to the side. Because you see that little swirl right there? That's the center. No matter where you start in the middle, that's going to be the center. Okay, so here we go. Are you getting this up there? Look at that. That was a pretty good spot to start right in the middle. So the first part here, I'm going to tamp it with some water, get it nice and hydrated, and I'm going to try to start pushing with the heel of my hand into the clay. You see this gets it nice and firm down on the board, and make sure that I'm getting everything ready to go to be centered. All right, then add some speed. Once we get going, get up to speed, now you already see it's kind of wobbly. That's okay. What we're going to do, the next part of this, is basically, it's wedging it again, but some people call it coning or whatever you like. And that's, I take my hands on both sides of it and kind of press, and then squeeze up to the middle and start making a cone. And I'm going to purposefully knock it out of whack a little bit here so you see when it's not centered what it looks like. That's what it's not supposed to do. So here's trick number one. Bring your wooden wedge tool over here, or your wooden, there's a name for it, and kind of push it up against there. You see, if you use that and then bring it together, you kind of help make that pyramid or that cone right at the top. You see how that comes together when you do it this way? Okay, that's already much more centered. Don't worry about all this extra stuff, just scrape it off. All right, here we go. That's the first method that looks pretty good. So if I wet my hands and kind of get down in there again. See, the more I push up to the top and you make that peak, you see what's happening here? That is definitely the center. And you know that because you see that little swirly at the top there that I can create with my finger, right? Now here's the fun part. You get to smash that. Just push it all the way back down on the wheel, and you're gonna feel it kind of resist you. Now the thing I should show you is where my elbows are at. See here? My elbows are on my knees. When I put my arms into the bat and the clay, I'm using a lot of my forearms and my muscles up in here. I'm using all of this. I'm not I'm putting them on the wheel itself. I'm kind of using my legs to brace them so that my arms aren't moving. That way the wedge isn't moving either, right? That pyramid comes up. Making pyramids. And there we go. And that's the first part of it, right? It's not too bad. So let's push it down again. We're gonna do this 2 or 3 times every time we throw on the wheel anyway. But see that when you flatten it out and it's still kind of wobbly and wonky like that, I like to get a little water on there and take a spare piece of wood, either a flat bat, any kind of deal that you have that you might bring your wood in there, that you might bring your piece in there to the kiln room, and make that damp. Put that right up against here and pull at an angle. See how it's angled towards me here? Now look what happened when I did that, right? It may be wonky, but it sure as heck went to center pretty quick. With that angle, I forced the cone. Now I get my hands down up in there and I bring it more to the top. And you actually see that it wedged perfectly again into that cone shape, that upside down ice cream cone, right? There we go. Wedge, wedge, wedge. Make it rise to the top. It's okay to get little swirlies in there because, here's the important part again. That's your center. Now let's flatten that. Now I use my left hand to kind of keep it guided while I'm using the heel or the thumb area of my right hand to press that down. When I press it into the wheel like that, you see how this is like a perfect little center right there, and it's not wobbly anymore. All right, here's my next favorite part of the whole centering process. This knuckle, the very last knuckle on your hand here, goes right in the middle, and you press down, and I keep it on the back side again. And as you're pressing into it, you've just flattened the top, but you've guaranteed that you still see that circle for your center, okay? So if yours looks like mine, you're good to go, okay? At this point, now I dribble a little water on top, and I take my index finger, and I find the middle just by pressing down and in. All right, and the more I let the clay guide my hand in, this part is called opening it up. When we open the clay, you're allowing your hand to make that hole in the middle. It's where we start to make our cylinder. I'll tell you more about cylinders as we get closer to it. But now I like to feel the outer edge to make sure it's smooth and it hasn't wobbled a whole bunch, but it's really just my comfort to do that. All right, so we get down in there. So again, your wheel is going at a pretty good clip and you're using your finger in here. I switched to my middle finger because I got a nice hook there. And this is what I call hooking it. If you get down in there, let's take some of that water out so you can see the bottom. If you get down in there and you feel you're a good ½ inch from the bottom of your piece that you're throwing, your cylinder, in this case our mug, you stop, hook your finger back, and you pull it out. You pull and pull and pull till you get a nice little crevice down in there. You see all the way down into the point. I'm gonna drip some water to make it easier. We add water to clay, that's called slip. So we're actually making the process where we can slip our finger easier through the clay and manipulate it. All right, so we got a nice wet piece here. Now you switch to your non-dominant hand, in this case my left hand. I'm getting in the middle. And I kind of like to feel the edge. I pull it out a little bit so that I feel the bottom edge. So then you take your finger or your knuckle, whichever you're comfortable with. I'm gonna show you with the finger because I use that. And this I found makes it easier. This process of touching the outside edges of the wall with one finger touching your hand, it gives you nice balance. It also gives you stability. But I kind of like it because it makes sure that I know that that's where that's going. All right, this I'm doing to feel the thickness of my wall and the clay body. The thickness here is everything, because if it gets too thick at the top and not thick enough at the bottom, it'll go all wobbly on you. But more importantly, when we start on the outside edge, we start pulling up. This is what I call the first pull is a mini pull, and this is just to make that wall even. Okay, kind of get a better angle here. If I get that here even, and it feels the same thickness all the way through, I can then start looking at the inside and the outside and the lip. Now I'm going to compress. Compressing is really important, and I'm going to tell you what I think it really means. Some people say, well, you know, it presses that clay at the bottom and squishes it together harder so that it stays and it dries right. Negative. That's not correct. What this process really does is that it's flattening the clay closer to the bat so that when you're done, your thickness of your walls is the same as your base. We're still going to trim the bottom off when we flip it over later, but the reason this part is important is because it makes this area here, again, this area on the side, less thick. There's not as much of a wedge between here and the bottom of the cup, right? Or the mug. So here we go. This is the second pull now. The second pull is important because you're going to start making your shape happen. You're starting to pull a good amount of that clay from the bottom up to the top, and you're raising the level. You should be able to see that up there. Can you see that up there? All right. And then the third pull is just all about your height at this point. It's about making sure that the lip and the sides are all the same. I get in there for one last compression. And so then I check. My thickness is about the same as my top at the base and the bottom. You know, if I use these two fingers, it all feels pretty good in there. So looking again down in the middle, you can see that there's some water. We'll take that out. That's not bad at all. That's kind of starting to look like a mug. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. That's the end of this episode. Make sure you watch Mugs Part 2, where we put on the finishing touches, cleanup, and the handles, and getting it ready for the kiln. Thanks for watching the Old School Podcast. Make sure you check out palmcreativestudios.com and, of course, our merchandise at mugslingingpyro.com.